No story whatsoever can be told about Calibishie during the period in time under review, and that story does not include JAHGUY. And again, the period that we are looking at in terms of the agenda of Calibishie Chronicle is the late 70s to the late 80s. Those 10 years, the most significant years in my developing life. That is when I understood who I have now become. That's where I started sensing the possibilities which exist. That's where I get my groundings in terms of the making of who I am today, which is somebody that I'm very satisfied with. And I decide to share the stories based on my own understanding and my lived experiences of that time, that decade between the late 70s and late 80s. And I include other stories that I would have learned from other individuals who experienced Calibishie before me. And some of my stories take us way back to hundreds of years in terms of how Calibishie was before Calibishie is now. So I am the driver behind the stories. They are my stories essentially, told through me, but they are stories which come from Calibishie. I try to keep it interesting, practical and relevant, because the idea is to engender a sense of civic responsibility and pride in this new generation of Calibishie folks in our community. And as I said before, you cannot tell the story that I am telling of Calibishie in the 80s and not mention JAHGUY. JAHGUY name was called along other big names like Simoon in Massac. Warehouse Disco, which was not a business like JAHGUY's, and I'll get into JAHGUY's business in a little while, was one of the edifice, which was a mecca in terms of entertainment and culture in Dominica. So too was JAHGUY. Spider, Newtown, well actually Loubier, Madrel, that entrance there, that junction between Loubier and Madrel, going towards under the cliff before you get into Point Michel. Well, right that junction there, Loubier Madrel junction. On the left hand side there, Spider sold pies and stuff like that. He was a legendary Dominican business in the 80s, into the 90s too. JAHGUY was among those. Now we had Melvina of late, which came on, do her thing and left. We had Miranda Connor holding steady. There was this Cabe, I think, in the territory. And there was, I mentioned, well, no, that is it in terms of other traditional. Well, there are other businesses too, but I won't get into all those businesses. I'm focusing on JAHGUY and Calibishie. So JAHGUY was to Calibishie what those businesses were to the communities. And among all the communities, JAHGUY featured very highly. JAHGUY was a proprietor, business owner, service provider who pretty much specialized in two things: fry bakes and fried chicken. Now JAHGUY would have the off on occasion fry fish, but that was not the main thing JAHGUY did. Although JAHGUY was a fisherman back in the day, his bread and butter was fried bakes and fried chicken. And JAHGUY always had a fresh and ready supply of food whenever it was demanded or whenever JAHGUY was opened. I will tell you about JAHGUY's business acumen and the way in which he operated, but you are going to have to wait until the next episode for that here on Calibishie Chronicle.